The Galactic Empire's fleet was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Hundreds of massive warships floated through space, armed with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Led by Admiral Zarog, the Empire's fleet was feared by every species. They believed nothing could stand in their way. One day, as they patrolled the outer edges of the galaxy, their sensors picked up something unusual. A strange signal was coming from a distant part of space. Admiral Zarog was curious. What could this be, he wondered aloud. The crew quickly scanned the area and found the source of the signal. It was a small single ship, barely visible against the darkness of space. A human ship? One of the officers said in disbelief. The humans were not considered a threat to the Empire. Their technology was outdated and they didn't have a large fleet. To see a lone human ship out here, far from any human colony, was strange. Admiral Zarog smiled. Is this a joke? A single human ship trying to challenge the Empire? He said, laughing. Prepare to destroy it. This won't take long. The fleet moved closer to the human ship. It was much smaller compared to the Empire's massive warships. The human ship didn't make any moves, just slowly drifting in space. Admiral Zarog's confidence grew. He gave the order to fire. Let's get rid of this pest, he said with a wave of his hand. The first wave of attacks from the Empire's ships was sent out, giant lasers and plasma cannons aimed straight at the human vessel. Zarog expected the ship to be destroyed in seconds, but something strange happened. The human ship didn't explode. The attacks seemed to vanish before hitting the ship, like they were being absorbed or blocked by some invisible force. Zarog frowned. What is this? He asked, confused. The officers were in shock. The human ship is still intact, Admiral, one of them said, his voice shaky. Our attacks had no effect. Admiral Zarog couldn't believe what he was seeing. How could a single human ship, so small and weak, survive an attack from the most powerful fleet in the galaxy? There must be a mistake, he muttered, watching the screens in disbelief. But before he could say anything more, the human ship finally moved. Its engines roared to life, and within seconds, it fired back. A single blast of energy shot from the human vessel, and before anyone could react, one of the Empire's largest warships exploded in a bright ball of fire. The shockwave from the explosion shook the surrounding ships. Impossible! Zarog shouted. One shot? One shot destroyed a capital ship? The entire bridge of Zarog's flagship was silent. No one could believe what had just happened. The human ship, alone and outnumbered, had taken down one of the Empire's most powerful ships with a single strike. Fear started creeping into the minds of Zarog's crew. What kind of ship were they dealing with? Admiral Zarog clenched his fists. He wasn't going to let this happen. Prepare all ships for a full attack, he commanded, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. We'll crush them with everything we've got. As the Empire's fleet readied itself for a massive assault, the human ship remained calm, floating silently among the stars. It wasn't running or showing any signs of fear. It was as if the lone ship knew something the Empire didn't. Admiral Zarog stood frozen, staring at the wreckage of his destroyed capital ship. His mind raced, trying to understand how one small human ship could do so much damage. The Galactic Empire's fleet had never seen anything like this. Their best ships, their strongest weapons, all seemed useless against this mysterious human vessel. Admiral, what are your orders? One of the officers asked, his voice trembling. The crew was nervous. They had all seen how quickly the human ship had destroyed one of their best warships. No one knew what would happen next. Zarog snapped out of his shock. Prepare all ships for a full-scale attack, he shouted, his voice filled with anger. We'll crush that ship with everything we've got. The officers quickly began giving orders, and the entire fleet started to move into attack formation. Dozens of massive warships surrounded the lone human vessel. Weapons were charged, and the air was thick with tension. Everyone expected a quick victory, but now there was fear in the air. What if the human ship wasn't as weak as they thought? The human vessel remained still, showing no signs of movement. It was as if the ship wasn't afraid, like it was waiting for them to make the first move. Fire at will, Zarog commanded. His fleet obeyed, and hundreds of beams of energy shot through space, all aimed at the small human ship. The display of power was incredible. The sky lit up with the bright flashes of laser fire, plasma cannons, and missiles. It seemed impossible that anything could survive such an attack. But when the smoke cleared, the human ship was still there. Not a single scratch marked its hull. Admiral Zarog's eyes widened in disbelief. How is this possible? He whispered. The crew stared at their screens, speechless. Every weapon they had fired had been neutralized by the human ship's mysterious defenses. It was as if the attacks had simply vanished into thin air. Admiral, we've never seen technology like this before, an officer said, his voice filled with fear. Our weapons aren't having any effect. Before Zarog could respond, the human ship made its move. Without warning, it unleashed a powerful blast of energy. The blast hit one of the Empire's warships directly, cutting through its shields like they didn't exist. In seconds, the massive ship exploded, sending debris flying in all directions. Another of the Empire's ships had been destroyed just like that. The bridge of Zarog's flagship went silent. No one had ever seen anything like it. One moment the warship was there, the next it was gone, reduced to nothing but flaming wreckage. Admiral Zarog's heart pounded in his chest. He had underestimated this human ship, and now his fleet was paying the price. He could see the fear in his officers' faces, and he felt it too. This was no ordinary ship. "Pull back!" Zarog finally ordered, his voice shaking. "We need to regroup!" But before the fleet could retreat, the human ship fired again. Another powerful energy blast tore through a third warship, destroying it in an instant. Panic spread through the Empire's fleet. Ships began moving in every direction, trying to escape the human ship's attacks. Admiral Zarog slammed his fist onto the console. This wasn't supposed to happen. His fleet was supposed to be unbeatable. How could one human ship be causing this much chaos? As his warship struggled to regroup, Zarog stared at the human vessel on the screen. It was still calm, still unmoving, and still winning. "What kind of ship is this?" he muttered, feeling the weight of fear pressing down on him. The human ship had only just begun, and Zarog realized, with dread, that his fleet might not survive this battle. Admiral Zarog watched in growing fear as his fleet, once proud and strong, struggled to survive. The human ship had destroyed 3 of his largest warships with ease. His crew, once confident, was now panicked. The bridge of his flagship was filled with nervous whispers and frantic movement. Every officer was trying to figure out how to stop this mysterious enemy, but no one had any answers. "Admiral, the human ship's technology is far beyond anything we've seen before," one of the officers said, his voice filled with fear. "Our weapons can't get through its shields." Zarog gritted his teeth. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of him. No matter how many times they attacked, the human ship came out without a scratch. It didn't matter if they used lasers, missiles, or plasma cannons, nothing worked. "How can one ship be so powerful?" Zarog muttered to himself. His mind raced, trying to think of a plan. He couldn't let his entire fleet fall to a single human vessel. The human ship moved gracefully through space, as if it had all the time in the world. It wasn't in a rush. It was calm, precise, and dangerous. The Empire's fleet, on the other hand, was in chaos. Ships were trying to dodge the human vessel's attacks, but no one knew where to go or what to do. Then the human ship fired again. A bright beam of energy shot out, hitting one of Zarog's warships. The ship's shields flickered for a moment, but then the blast cut through them like paper. The warship exploded in a ball of fire. Zarog's fleet had lost yet another ship. "Another one down," an officer whispered, his face pale. "Focus!" Zarog snapped. "We still have plenty of ships left. We just need to find its weakness." But deep down, Zarog knew they were running out of time. Every second that passed, more of his fleet was being destroyed. The human ship was simply too advanced. It had weapons and shields that the Galactic Empire had never seen before, and nothing Zarog did seemed to make a difference. The Admiral's mind raced. How could the humans have developed such advanced technology? The Empire had always seen humans as a weak species, barely able to defend themselves. But this ship, this one small ship, was proving them all wrong. What if... Zarog thought for a moment. What if this ship isn't just human technology? What if they've been hiding something from the rest of the galaxy? His thoughts were interrupted as the human ship fired again. Another one of his warships was destroyed in an instant. Zarog clenched his fists in frustration. He couldn't let this continue. "Admiral, we're down to half our fleet," an officer said, his voice shaking. "We can't take much more of this." Zarog knew he had to act fast. "All ships, form a defensive perimeter," he ordered. "We need to regroup and figure out how to stop this thing." The remaining ships tried to form up, but the human vessel was too fast. It darted between them, firing precise shots that hit the weakest points of each warship. The Empire's ships were big, slow, and bulky, while the human ship moved like a predator, hunting its prey. "Admiral, we can't keep up," one of the officers shouted. "It's too fast! We're being picked apart!" Zarog's heart sank. He had never felt so helpless. For the first time in his career, he was facing an enemy he couldn't outsmart or overpower. The human ship was too advanced, its technology too far beyond anything the Empire had. As another warship exploded in the distance, Zarog knew that they were outmatched. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight against the future. The humans had technology that could change everything, and Zarog realized, with a sinking feeling, that the Empire might not survive this battle. Admiral Zarog stood at the center of his command ship, his eyes fixed on the battlefield before him. He could hardly believe what was happening. The Galactic Empire, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was crumbling. His fleet, once feared by all, was being torn apart by a single human ship. Ship after ship fell, vanishing in bursts of fire and debris. "Admiral, we've lost over 70% of our fleet," an officer called out, his voice cracking with panic. Zarog's fists clenched, his knuckles turning white. Never had he imagined such a catastrophe. All his life, he had served the Empire, believing in its absolute power. But now, that power was nothing before the human ship's superior technology and skill. It felt like watching a mountain being reduced to dust. "Pull back!" Zarog finally ordered, his voice shaky. "We need to regroup!" But there was no chance for retreat. The human ship didn't give them time to escape. Moving like a ghost through the stars, it cut down each of Zarog's ships with deadly precision. Another warship exploded on the view screen, followed by yet another. There was no stopping it. "How can we fight something we don't understand?" An officer muttered under his breath. The question hung in the air, heavy and hopeless. Zarog couldn't answer. How could the Empire, with all its resources, be losing so easily? How had the humans created such unstoppable technology? These questions haunted him as more of his fleet was reduced to rubble. The once great armada that had terrorized entire star systems was now reduced to a few scattered ships, running from an enemy they couldn't defeat. "Admiral, the human ship is advancing!" Another officer shouted, panic rising in his voice. "It's targeting us directly!" Zarog's eyes widened. "Raise the shields! Prepare all weapons!" But deep inside, he knew it was too late. The human ship had already proven it could destroy anything the Empire threw at it. His flagship, the pride of the fleet, wouldn't be any different. On the screen, the human ship came closer, still calm, still silent. Its sleek design glinted in the light of the distant stars, a reminder of how far human technology had advanced. For all its simplicity, the ship was a masterpiece of war, a perfect weapon. "Fire everything we've got!" Zarog commanded, desperation creeping into his voice. The ship's cannons roared to life, sending wave after wave of energy blasts toward the human vessel. Missiles flew through space, racing toward their target. For a moment, it seemed like the Empire still had a chance. But once again, the human ship's defenses held. The shields shimmered, absorbing every attack without even a scratch. It was like fighting a phantom. Nothing touched it. And then it struck. The human ship fired one powerful blast, and Zarog's flagship shuddered violently. The bridge lights flickered, and alarms blared. The blast had pierced through their shields and hit them directly. "Damage report!" Zarog shouted, holding onto the console as the ship shook. "Critical damage to the engines and weapons systems, Admiral," an officer replied. "We're losing power!" Zarog's heart pounded. He knew what was coming. The human ship had them in its sights, and there was nothing they could do. The Empire's most powerful ship was about to fall, just like all the others. "Admiral, it's over," one of the officers whispered, his voice filled with defeat. Zarog stood still, staring at the screen. His mind raced with disbelief, anger, and fear. How could this have happened? How could the Empire be brought to its knees by a single human ship? Before he could respond, the human ship fired one final blast. The screen went dark, and the bridge was filled with the sound of destruction. In moments, Zarog's flagship was nothing but wreckage, floating in the vastness of space. The Galactic Empire's greatest fleet had fallen, and with it, their dominance over the galaxy. And all it took was one lone human ship. The battlefield was silent. Where once there had been the might of the Galactic Empire's fleet, there was now only wreckage drifting through space. The lone human ship hovered calmly, untouched by the destruction around it. Its mission was not yet complete. On every planet, every outpost, and every station within the Galactic Empire, there was chaos. News of the Empire's defeat was spreading like wildfire. The powerful fleet that had ruled for centuries was gone, destroyed by a single human ship. The galaxy was in shock. Inside the human ship, Captain Sarah Lawson watched the aftermath on her screen. She knew that this was more than a victory. This was the end of the Galactic Empire's reign. She leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of the moment. But there was still one final step to take. "Are the comms ready?" Sarah asked her communications officer, her voice calm but firm. "Ready, Captain," the officer replied. Sarah stood up and walked over to the main console. She took a deep breath and straightened her uniform. The message she was about to send would be broadcast to the entire galaxy. Every planet, every ship, and every station would hear it. The humans had been quiet for far too long, but now the galaxy needed to understand the truth. "Begin transmission," Sarah ordered. The communications officer pressed a button, and across the galaxy, screens flickered to life. Millions of beings, from the wealthiest elites of the Empire to the poorest citizens in the outer colonies, stared at their screens, waiting to hear the message from the human ship that had brought the Empire to its knees. Sarah appeared on the screen, her face calm but determined. She stood tall, the destroyed Empire fleet visible behind her through the ship's windows. "This is Captain Sarah Lawson of the United Earth Defense Force," she began. Her voice was clear, and her words echoed across the galaxy. "To all who hear this, know that the reign of the Galactic Empire is over. They have been defeated, and their fleet has been destroyed." There was a pause as her words sank in. People across the galaxy couldn't believe what they were hearing. The Empire had ruled for as long as anyone could remember. Its fall seemed impossible, but the evidence was right before their eyes. "For centuries," Sarah continued, "the Empire has oppressed, conquered, and enslaved countless worlds. They believed their power was absolute, that no one could challenge them. But they were wrong." Her voice grew stronger, filled with conviction. "Humanity has always sought peace. We have always preferred diplomacy and cooperation. But when forced to defend ourselves, we will not hesitate. We will not allow any power, no matter how strong, to threaten us or our allies." The message spread quickly, carried across star systems. On planets once controlled by the Empire, people watched with growing hope. The fall of the Empire meant freedom for many. And Sarah's words resonated with those who had long suffered under Imperial rule. "The galaxy is at a turning point," Sarah said, her eyes steady. "No longer will any one empire dominate the stars. From this day forward, humanity will stand as a protector of peace and freedom. We invite all species to join us in this new era. Together we can build a future where no one lives in fear." Sarah's words were a declaration, not just of victory, but of a new order. The Galactic Empire was gone, but what came next was up to the galaxy. And humanity, once thought weak and insignificant, now stood as a force to be reckoned with. "To the galaxy," Sarah concluded, "we say this: we are not your enemies, but if you threaten us or those we care about, you will face the consequences. Let this battle serve as a reminder." The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, people were left in stunned silence. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer a bystander in galactic affairs. They had proven their strength, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sarah sat back in her chair, watching the stars through the ship's window. The battle was over, but a new chapter for humanity was just beginning.